Director, you talked about the territorial gains we've had against ISIL in both Iraq and in Syria. But I'd like to get the intelligence assessment, agency's assessment of what it would look like in Syria, what the challenges are, what the intelligence shows, the complexity of, it's a mixed cocktail of opposition groups and so forth. So if ISIL is defeated, what are we facing, what are we continuing to face in Syria, whether Assad stays or whether he goes? There's going to be significant questions raised as to what we're going to be facing. I think there's maybe some people coming to the conclusion that all we have to do is defeat ISIS in Syria and in Iraq, and then everything will be fine. We know that they've metastasized to a number of other nations, but my question is, what is Syria going to look like if and when that happens, and what kind of challenges are we going to have?
You're absolutely right, Senator. Syria is a virulent cocktail of actors, many of which are in violent conflict with one another. There are two principal terrorist organizations that operate inside of Syria. One is ISIL, that we've talked about, and the other is Jabhat al-Nusra, which is al-Qaeda in Syria. That also has formidable capabilities and a presence throughout the country of several thousands of fighters, some of them just engaged in the battlefield against President Assad, but also some who are plotting to carry out terrorist attacks outside of Syria. So what we want to do is to be able to destroy those two terrorist organizations. As you well know, the U.S. government supports the moderate Syrian opposition, represented on the battlefield by the Free Syrian Army. And so if we're able to eliminate those terrorist groups, there's still a long ways to go, though, in order to address some of the outstanding issues inside of Syria. The Syrian opposition was generated because of concerns that the Sunni majority had against the Bashar Assad regime that was abusing its authorities and its powers. So there needs to be some resolution of outstanding confessional tensions between Shia and Sunni. You have Christians, you have Druze, you have others inside of Syria. And this is where we believe that Bashar Assad needs to depart the Syrian political scene so there can be a more representative and legitimate government that's able to preside over the Syrian country. But in addition to that, you have tensions between the Syrian Kurds in the northern part of Syria and the Arabs in the rest of the country. So there is a lot of tensions. It's very similar in some respects to that cocktail that exists within Lebanon, where the multi-confessional nature of the country really has been a serious impediment for Lebanon to have a functional political system. So we have a long way to go, but the important thing is to destroy the terrorist organizations there, bring the conflict down, stop the bloodshed, bring in the humanitarian assistance that the Syrian people so richly deserve and need, and then be able to make sure that we're able to develop a governance structure that is going to be representative of the Syrian people and be able to address the reconstruction of the country, which is going to cost billions upon billions of dollars.
Given the Russian involvement in Syria now and whatever decisions they make relative to either Assad remaining or Assad leaving, how does that complicate the resolution for some kind of a settlement, ceasefire, or whatever?
Well, as you know, Russia brought its military force to bear last September in Syria with aircraft, artillery, and personnel as a way to prevent what they saw as an imminent collapse of the Bashar Assad regime. They have bolstered the regime forces, and they are involved right now in carrying out strikes against the opposition. We work very closely and talk with the Russians about how to bring this conflict down. We work with them to try to see what we can do on the counterterrorism front. But I have been disappointed that the Russians have not played a more constructive role in terms of leveraging its influence inside of Syria to bring the Syrian regime and military forces down in terms of their engagement and to be more helpful as far as a negotiating track. This problem of Syria is not going to be resolved on the battlefield. It has to be resolved on the political front. And Secretary Kerry has been working very, very hard and long to try to stimulate some traction there. And the Russians, I believe, can do more, both in terms of the restraint that they can put on the Syrian forces, but also more constructive engagement on the political front.
Is Assad stronger today or less weaker today than he was a year ago?
A year ago, he was on his back foot as the opposition forces were carrying out operations that really were degrading the Syrian military. As a result of the Russian military intervention, he is in a stronger position than he was in June of last year.
And does that enhance the ability to reach a diplomatic solution, or does it lessen the ability to do that?
Again, it depends on how Russia decides to exercise its influence. But right now, the strengthened Syrian military and Russian unwillingness to use the leverage that it has made it, I think, more difficult.
Sounds like the Russians have put themselves in a position which we hoped they'd never be.